Everybody. Welcome to wasmCloud Tuesdays, where we're going to have a little meeting about machine learning today. Christoph, we'll turn it over to you for the agenda.
Yes, I think my screen cannot be shared. Let's maybe.
Bringing the traditions from wasmCloud Wednesday over to wasmCloud Tuesday.
You're now a co-host.
Okay, let me select the right desktop, and then we should go ahead. Okay, great. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
So I mean, I do not really want to lead. I just try to merely clever copy things, but at least say my story is like that. I came across wasmCloud roughly last summer, and then for a while I was thinking about, okay, what to do with it. I mean, what kind of nice killer application one could code with it. Later on, I stumbled on Andrew your wasmNN, and at the same time, maybe on the super nice blogs from Radu Matai. And I've read many of your posts and also from Radu. And then the idea was to connect wasmCloud and ML could really fit a gap, which I see me as a maybe not super expert in machine learning and AI, but not a beginner as well. So what I do see is if you see any courses, any media articles, whatever, anything is about learning and the new types and kinds of models. What is, to my objective mind, somehow underrepresented is the production aspects of ML, like how to put already trained models to production, how to keep them productive in production. And I'm convinced that wasmCloud plus the ML side could really fill a gap there. So I'm here to help filling that one. And yes, we've set up a little GitHub repository where we might spawn some hopefully fruitful discussions around. And I made the first proposals. So if you see that screen, I would like to settle the scope. I mean, nothing is settled, for instance. So I think we are totally open to anything. However, there are some proposals. Then, yeah, I would really like to stick around the most important design decisions, maybe. And also, we would like to have a demo application which could show the potential, right? And it would be interesting to discuss the design briefly. And then, as usual, I mean, Liam, you already made proposals for a target hardware, which we could use. And if we agree on the same target hardware, we are on the same page, so to say, so that it would be very advantageous. And last but not least, it's always interesting to watch the risks in any venture. So I think this is a good habit, risks and open points. If you want, I would like to make a few proposals. So I said my personal idea is to use or to put the best out of wasmCloud and AI and put things into production, so the AI models. So the proposal for the scope is to really focus on inference and maybe not at all on training, because I think for training you have all the known frameworks like TensorFlow and PyTorch and scikit-learn and so on. But I do see the gap in using it in production. So what do you do? Mainly inference. So that's the first proposal, to really concentrate on that aspect. I briefly go through maybe on the remaining few. So the next one would be with the idea to implement a capability provider, which is an inference engine then, in fact. And having seen all the nice articles from Andrew and Radu Matai, I think it would be easiest, at least somehow straightforward, to copy from wasmNN, like to port it, and to use, for example, the open source project Tract as a basis. I tried it outside of wasmCloud. It works very well, I think. And also I concentrated on ONNX. It's an abbreviation for the Open Neural Net Exchange format. So if you have any model from any of the big known famous frameworks, like, as I said, TensorFlow and PyTorch and so on, usually you can easily transform or convert to that format. So you could use also that inference engine. And this is it. I mean, and then there's maybe one very interesting question left, or design decision. When I started to care about the topic, I wondered how the respective AI model might be packaged and served. And so I read a certain book at times, a Tiny ML, written by some Googlers. And once I've seen that they deal with AI models in the form of bare byte arrays, I thought, wow, that would be easy to package them in WebAssembly modules. In fact, I did, and I served an inference engine from WebAssembly modules compiled to wasm32 unknown. I think this is what we compile actors to. And so that was the next thought, to put the respective AI model in an actor each. Then we are consistent with wasmCloud, right? However, in a little discussion, Steve showed that there are interesting alternatives. So for me, that's a very interesting question which remains open. And that's what I would like to begin with. I hope it's an interesting start for you guys.
This is absolutely incredible, Christoph. I really appreciate how well prepared you've kind of come to the meeting, and how much thought went into this. And I knew from our conversations that you'd already done a ton of work on this. On our side, Steve, Kevin. What? I'm sorry. What was that?
My mic is not muted.
Okay. On our side, Steve, Kevin, I'm not sure if you guys would want to jump in on the approach, and maybe just like the high level approach here. Anything jump out at you guys that you guys would want to redirect or give some guidance on?
I mean, really, the only comment I have is, like, if I had been going down this path and I wanted to start thinking about how to do this, this is exactly how I would have done it. So I'm, yeah, it's this is really cool, and I can't wait to see how this moves forward.
Okay. Well, I don't think anybody has any questions, Christoph. I think that we're all in agreement that this is a good way to move forward. So do we go ahead and talk through, if we're all on board that, that when we think about the scope is right, and that we think that mimicking WasmN is a good approach, I think we can go ahead and maybe drop into some design proposals and surface more details here if we want to just step forward into the next section. But I would say that silence is acceptance on the collaboration and the plan here. Obviously, everybody's reserved as we get in further to sort of provide additional feedback as we have new insights. Andrew, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I did have a couple comments, and one comment, one question. One, I think the scope is great, right? I think if you get in, this is what we, when we were designing wasmN, clearly training models is a bigger, tougher nut to crack than inference, and deploying inference, which seems to be sort of your goal here, is actually a very super useful goal. So I'm fully on board with the scope stuff. I just want to double down on that. The tracked part, why tracked, and am I correct in understanding that tracked sort of compiles models down to WebAssembly?
So the reason why tracked, so the first question is easy. I mean, it's one of the few inference engines I know. Before I played a little bit with OpenVINO, don't know how you spell it correctly. Also a bit with TensorFlow, but I like tracked. I mean, it's purely written in Rust. It worked very well. And I even compiled it down. So I even compiled the inference engine down to wasm32 unknown. So in theory, one could deploy it as an actor as well. Don't know if you want it. So the downside for me is, what could also be very interesting, for me, it's on the plus side. Liam, you seem to be very interesting in the ARM architecture, so supporting the ARM architecture. And hopefully I referenced a nice article about the history of Tract. And so they say exactly that they, I will look it up. And so they said that they would concentrate on the ARM architecture, supporting that and different derivatives. The downside is it only supports CPUs. Yeah, I mean, you don't have currently, and I think it's also not on the roadmap, so you cannot take advantage of any accelerators, not GPU and not TPU.
Where do we think the mind share is? From a community perspective, we probably want to, align our POC. I mean, if we follow the WASI-NN, our work essentially is designed to be pluggable here. And you guys have got some good, I think, existing work around the CPU work you did initially. And you guys is it public, the other piece you're working on? I don't want to jump a shark here.
What, the GPU stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's public, I think. I don't know if we published the data, but the fact that, the WASI-NN proposal includes in its, enum for where you can suggest to run stuff, it includes a GPU option. So, I mean, that it's there. We've tried it. Honestly, the integrated GPUs are not the place to run this stuff. You want to use a dedicated discrete GPU. That's where you're going to get the best performance. If I can circle back on the Tract question, I think for us from Intel, one reason WASI-NN is the way it is because we want to give the hardware the ability to perform at its maximum, throughput for inference. And so if you do end up going down a path like Tract, it's a good compatibility path, right? You could, compile everything to WebAssembly, but you're going to, you will lose the performance that you'd gain otherwise. And that was like a key design thing for us, right? You can lose CPU performance on Intel chips, right? But you can also lose GPU performance, right? As soon as you go down to WebAssembly, you're not going to be using GPUs to run this stuff.
May I ask a question to that?
Sure.
You referred to two things. One is that WASI-NN, and the other thing is Tract here. For me, as far as I understand these, they are different. So WASI-NN for me fits very well to what we call interface at wasmCloud, because it has these 5 methods. Hopefully I counted right. Which allow to connect the 2 players, like an inference engine and the user. And what we put behind, I think we are free. And I agree in that we should not shoot only maybe on Tract. So if you have to propose anything, I mean, let's go with it. At least in the long run. So if you really want to support that, put to your code base and distribute that, maybe we could support more than one engine, right? And maybe even a different first engine. I don't mind.
Sounds like sounds like we're on the same page, right? Because that you're saying the same things I was saying when we first designed it is like we want to be able to support any engine, any backend, any ML backend should be a possibility. And other people at Intel do optimize. Well, we have a whole team that optimizes OpenVINO, right? Then there's a team that works with TensorFlow to help the Google guys optimize that. And there's a team that works with Onyx to optimize that. So, I would just say to this bullet point that if with my Intel hat on, for peak performance, you're probably going to want to look at one of those other, native backends. And the reason WASI-NN is designed the way it is so that you can do that. Right, you can get peak performance. Anyway, sorry, that's my point.
Well, I did some research. I pulled up a bunch of research reports last night, just around trying to understand where the mind share was on this. And I am curious if, when we think about the community that we want to engage first, if there isn't an opportunity for us to engage with a larger group of interested users through TensorFlow, or Andrew, internally, and maybe you can't speak to this or not, do you feel like what out of those 3 different ways forward, what has the sort of weight and the mind share and the activity across the various platforms?
in a recorded session, I'm not going to comment on what Intel promotes, which way, but I will say that, you know, I think from what I've seen, TensorFlow has more users. And Intel's optimizing all of those platforms.
That's my feeling as well. And the sort of cursory research I did on the hardware side, Christoph, was that comparing algorithms across trips, the couple of things I found out on the internet was the TensorFlow TPUs from Google were through the roof. So I was even thinking about maybe their Coral Edge AI devices as the hardware platform we could build on. That would give us a CPU and a TPU. We could run a CPU version of the algorithms and then seamlessly upgrade to, or somehow upgrade to the TPU version of the algorithm as well. So I think that is those are some considerations we may want to take to think in mind. Bailey, you're working with Python related stuff, aren't you?
Yeah, so hey Christoph, I don't think we've met. I have gotten to meet Andrew. So I work at Singlestore. We're a database company. And one of the things that we've added is the ability to embed WebAssembly in our database. Something else that I've been playing around with in my free time is adding a capability provider that is Singlestore or wasmCloud. But I'm also super interested in it and the better together story, and that I really would love to see wasmCloud and be an awesome platform for machine learning. But I'm doing a lot of parallel things for making machine learning great in our database. So we did show off, you can watch our YouTube talk where we actually put in a sentiment analysis function in our database and ran that from Jupyter Notebook. So we've got a few different customers that we've been working with. I can't say who, especially because it's recorded, but they have handed us, they're able to export to Onyx. So I think that's definitely the right answer. But one of the biggest problems that they have is that they have a ton of pre-processing steps, especially when handed new data. There's sort of a extract, transform, load process that seems to be super common. And so for us to get these two main customers working with WebAssembly, we had to tackle the Python problem. And so we went down the route of modifying core Python to support WebAssembly as an output target with WASI, and then adding interface types to that so that when you write normal native Python code, you get an interface type that's tied to your WASM module. And then you really have no idea when you're writing in our little Jupyter notebook that it is interacting with WebAssembly at all, but that's actually what it is and how it gets loaded. All that to say, I think you guys are going down the right path. I'm really excited. I am wondering if you looked at Apache TVM at all. That's another one that maybe would be part of the tracked discussion. And they've also been doing experiments with WebAssembly as well. Another cool thing about them is that they've got an mscripten output, so it works in the web, and then another one that is your standalone WASI output. I played around with them a little bit. It looks like they haven't kept their fork up to date, but they might be somebody else we might want to pull in. And yeah, so right now, I think one thing that would be really cool is if we can make sure that we can create actors that are Python based. I think that'll really pull in a lot more people from the data science community.
The one aspect I really liked was what you mentioned in the beginning. You said that your customers have rather ETL pipelines, right? I mean, usually people do not have one model, but a whole pipeline. So I mean, that fits to my work context. So I didn't mention, I think I work for BMW as a data scientist. So typically I would program in Apache Spark, and yes, I have a bunch of models. That's something I do not have a good answer to. I mean, how to implement or model a pipeline such that it is fun even in wasmCloud. Don't know, but yeah, I mean, first things first. But very interesting that you mentioned that.
Well, look, I think the Steve his mic's not working, but in a private chat he said, look, I think the important thing is that we get one of the three working, and that if we're aligned to WASI and N, the others will follow as plugins. So if we think about maybe what comes after the interface, what's going to give us the turnkey experience we want, maybe a second consideration, like how much after work do we have here? What are we going to pick up and be able to clone? So I don't know if maybe the example application might inform what our selection is. So for example, if we're going to do something with a CPU, vision or recognition, Christoph, that was something that we had kind of talked through. The Google Tensor, Coral TPU devices have a little camera that you can add, and little boxes you can 3D print with all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm not sure if that would help us to define what the best path forward here is to support as well. Andrew, on the WASI and N integrations, where was the friction in your experience with OpenVINO, and are you guys going to work on a TensorFlow plugin for that we could use as inspiration or guidance?
Yeah. So the current state is the OpenVINO backend works, and well, I guess all our efforts to date have been to integrate these backends into wasmTime, right? You want to integrate backends as providers in wasmCloud. Cool. Here's the status of the backends that are implemented to wasmTime that you might be able to use to do that. OpenVINO works. It's great, right? It ships with wasmTime now, right behind a flag. Onyx, Radu had that working. Did some demos with it, but he never merged it upstream. But it probably could be with a little bit of work, right? Third, TensorFlow. Brian Jones, another guy on my team, just finished a pull request that's currently in a draft state to get TensorFlow working in wasmTime. So that's probably in order from most production ready to least production ready. But I can send you the PRs and we could look at the code if you want to use any of those as a start.
Christoph, what are your thoughts on that? And Kevin, I'm sorry, you had your hand up. Do you want to jump in? And let me actually just note real quick, I'm not sure if others can stay over. I've got a hard stop at 3:30, but Brooks can hang out on our side, and I think, Kevin, you can hang out. Taylor and I have a customer meeting that we need to jump over to at 3:30. So I'll bounce off here. Brooks is already the co-host, but I will catch up on the recording via the cloud for the rest of the meeting to see where folks get. Brooks, any problems? Did you get the host?
Yeah, I got it. So we should be good.
Great. And Kevin, I'm sorry, you put your hand up, and then I'd love to hear, Christoph, your thoughts. You've put in a lot of the vision here and work around what you're thinking.
So Kevin first, right?
Please, Kevin.
Yeah, I didn't want to derail the current thread. I just wanted to make sort of a side comment. Bailey had brought up things like Python actors, and right now the limitation really isn't one on wasmCloud. It's more that Python doesn't compile to freestanding WebAssembly. At least all the stuff that I've been able to see, the only way you can get it to work is through various different hacks and shims where they rely on a JavaScript host runtime in order to almost bake the Python runtime. So once that situation clears up a little bit, then we might be able to reevaluate some prototype actors in Python. But right now, we just compile them.
We've got a demo of it working standalone, and that has been core Python changes. You're totally right about that. If you hop on the Python Discord thread, we've got 2 core Python maintainers working on upstreaming that work now.
Wow, that is awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could send me a link to some of that stuff, that's fantastic.
Cool, then wrapping up, my thoughts are about the overall approach. So the fun thing is, in my work, I work in a department where we are responsible for integrating stuff. I mean, like we collect from many developers and many other departments and try to put together and try to see things working. So I think about breadth first or depth first. Personally, I would love to look into your input, Andrew, what you mentioned before others. I'm totally open. Personally, I would love to see anything working. I mean, a whole super tiny application which can be seen, showed off, field maybe, that it works. And then I think once that works, we could change things quickly and add up. So I'm open. I see some other risks in the application itself and the application design. Some questions which are open to me. So I would like to address these, see these working, and then I think we can do anything.
Yeah.
So my experience is, I mean, let's integrate stuff because it's really hard mostly.
If we're wrapping up the meeting, do we mind killing the record thing? And then I would love to just dive into some details with Christoph if you have a few minutes.
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds great. So thanks everyone. I will end the recording.
Okay.